What is going on, guys? It's the Mad Dragon. We're on to round 2 of the Six Nations. Round 1 was absolutely fantastic, but round 2 has some really exciting fixtures over this week. Of course, we need to do the preview videos where we check out the official teams that have been named to be playing in these games. We'll have a run through the team list, who's some good picks, some bad picks, maybe think about some team tactics they might both be implementing, and finally giving a score prediction of how we think this game might go. If you enjoy your rugby content, make sure to subscribe and comment down in the comment section your thoughts on the team's names. We're going to be starting out with Scotland versus Wales. Now, this is game 2 of the weekend, but Ireland are taking forever to actually announce their team. So these teams have come out first. So we'll start out by looking at this game first. Starting off then, Scotland, the home team going into this one. Now, Scotland-Wales is a fixture I absolutely love every single year. As a Wales supporter, this is the game I've been to see most, like going to the actual stadium and seeing these games. The rivalry between Scotland and Wales is such a fantastic one because you have a real rivalry during the game, but then everyone's hugging and shaking hands at the end of the game because they absolutely love the sport together. They have a real nice, compassionate rivalry between the two nations and the two sets of fans. So this one, a good fixture as well. I didn't actually realise just quite how dominant Wales have been in this fixture. I thought it'd be fun because this is the year Scotland could absolutely look in to do really well. They had such a good game last week. So a little bit of a factoid for you guys. So I did want to go back and have a look at this fixture, being one of my favourites, just to see how the results have gone in the past. And I was quite surprised by this. Scotland won this game back in 2007, and since 2007 have only ever won this fixture twice. Across that, once in 2017 and once in 2020. So Wales have been pretty dominant in this fixture before, but this Scotland team that we got to see England play last week is looking extremely dangerous. They had a fantastic game in that Calcutta Cup, a couple of names especially putting their hands up. So in terms of the team that's been named going into this game, there's not a lot of changes to talk about, but of course we'll have a run through them as we do. So Pierre Schoeman and George Turner are turning out in that front row, now joined by Xander Fagerson coming in for WP Nell. Xander Fagerson, I believe, has been out for a couple of months with an injury by what I've been reading, some articles and stuff. I've not kept up to date completely with my club level rugby, so I'm finding it out as I go. In the lock department, Richie Gray alongside Grant Gilchrist. They were both playing extremely well last week, as was this back row. Jamie Ritchie, Luke Crosby and Matt Fagerson. A couple of people dropping down in the comments last week. I was talking about Hamish Watson not being in this side. A couple of people informed me he'd just come back from his injury as well, which is why he wasn't chosen. But a couple of people were really annoyed that I didn't know that. I don't know everything about every rugby player, guys. This is the joy of rugby. You're always learning. There's always fun stuff to learn. But Luke Crosby last week having a fantastic game, along with Matt Fagerson, both of which scoring quite well in the fantasy leagues, if anyone joining in with the fantasy. A couple of people surprised that I didn't put them in my team of the week. I just thought that the Irish back row was doing extremely well as well. But 1 to 8, showing off last week. The scrummaging was looking good. The lineouts were looking relatively solid for the majority of the game, but some of these forwards for Scotland looking extremely dangerous. But the area that I was most surprised at was the Scottish back. Starting out with the halfback partnership, Ben White coming in alongside Finn Russell. Ben White getting his try last week, and I sort of said it leading up to that game. Ben White's my starter at scrum half for Scotland. I think he should start all 5 games. I really want to see what he can bring. Speed from the back of the ruck is nice and quick from him, but also just that little spin going himself for his try. Caught out, had to think on the spot, managed to get a nice bit around Ben Curry and ran over for his try. Fantastic work from him. You want to see more stuff like that in this Scotland team. Just having people who can just work completely independently, and I think he did really well. Finn Russell was my team of the week fly half. I thought he had a really nice game, only missing 1 kick last week. Did hit the post. It's about as close as you can possibly get, but nice way he was driving that team last week. In the centre partnership, Tui Pelotu back alongside Hugh Jones. Now, Huey Pelotu, as I got to hear about a lot over the weekend, which was really nice to say, like a centre partnership name. Still surprised to not see Chris Harris starting. Hugh Jones last week had a really nice sort of comeback to this Scottish team, got himself a try over, making massive ground in terms of finding gaps in that English defensive line. Going up against Wales, it's quite a hard call because Wales last week seemed to be really struggling with some of the pressure that was being applied by Ireland. Maybe Scotland have seen it the same way. Maybe you don't need someone like Chris Harris who's going to be awesome in that defence if your game plan is going to be we're just going to steamroll them over and over and over again and put the pressure on them. That's where Hugh Jones and Tui Pelotu together is quite a dangerous running style. But Tui Pelotu did well defensively last week, including the amount of offloads and passes he was getting away was quite high in terms of the stats as well. I think he was in my team of the week as well, actually, last week as well. Moving on to the back 3 then, Duhan van der Merwe, of course, retaining that left wing. Can you imagine if he got dropped for this game? Not a chance. Absolutely fantastic from him last week. 2 tries, over 100 metres made, a billion defenders beaten. Not an official stat. but did extremely well. Kyle Steyn actually, I thought, played quite well. Looking back at some of the highlights and stuff from that game, Kyle Steyn actually made quite a big impact into that game as well on that right wing. Of course, Darcy Graham's still out, but Kyle Steyn's holding that wing out well. He's been sort of 50-50 for me so far in terms of a Scottish international career. Looking forward to see how he goes on in this game. And then finally, Stuart Hogg, who felt, I don't know, a little bit quiet for me last week. Didn't feel like he was necessarily getting hugely involved. I think in terms of backs making big impact for me, it was the likes of Duan van der Merwe and Hugh Jones in terms of finding the gap. But of course, just a veteran of the sport. I think he's also Scotland's all-time try scorer. So you can never count out Stuart Hogg. You know what he does in terms of his counter-attacking run. So only one change in the starting 15, and why not? If you're looking like you're having a good performance in your opponents, looking like they might be a bit shaky, no reason to make too many changes. In the replacements then, Fraser Brown comes in alongside Jamie Batty and WP Nell. Of course, now with Xander Ferguson starting that front row, so WP Nell moves to the bench. The rest of the replacement forwards, Johnny Gray alongside Jack Dempsey, who, do we even get to see a lot of Jack Dempsey? I can't even really think back to him being that much in the game. I think I was enjoying watching so many of the other backs just sort of running around with the game. I wasn't necessarily concentrating too much on the forwards last week. And then in terms of the replacement backs, George Horn, Blair Kinghorn, and Chris Harris. We sort of went over this last week in the preview video, just about the coverage that someone like Blair Kinghorn offers you in terms of covering wing, fullback, and fly half, while Chris Harris can also come on either 12 or 13, but I think a lot of the time most people expect to see Chris Harris play that outside centre. But I think this is a good Scotland team, and as a Wales supporter, outside of doing the channel, I think Scotland are in for a real good shout this one. This will be a big target game for them. Just wanted to try and get another win under their belt. Could be seeing them have a really good Six Nations. Moving on to Wales then, who of course had that pretty tough game against Ireland. It sort of went the way we sort of expected it to. World number one, they're playing top tier rugby at the minute. Wales had a tough old game trying to make the most of it. They had portions where it certainly looked like things were going their way. They were getting everything done correctly. But Ireland just outplaying them in so many little areas, just in the breakdown zones, the way the speed of the ball was being recycled, slowing down Wales, making men commit to too many things. And Wales just on occasion found themselves a little bit out of shape and giving passes out to people like James Lowe. He's going to run the length of the field, can't afford to be doing that. So Wales this week shaking it up. There was a lot of talk at the end of last week's game about the old guard in Wales. Are they too slow? Are they too old? Are they really holding on now? They've gone for a slightly younger team. There's a few changes been made along the way. In the front row then, Wyn Jones comes in alongside Ken Owens and Dylan Lewis. So a bit of a shift up in this front row. They obviously weren't necessarily too happy with how the forwards were doing. There was a couple shaky lineouts from Ken Owens, which is not something I think I've ever really said on this channel. He's normally very good in terms of the lineouts, but the Irish scrum is pretty mega, and the Scottish scrum's been doing well. So, I think bringing these lads on, Wyn Jones is also, for me, very good in terms of the jackal, in terms of being a loose head prop. I think he's good in terms of defensive breakdown. Maybe Wales are expecting to come under quite a lot of pressure in this game, so having another jackler in the team, I think is a good move. Into the lock department then, Adam Beard in that 5 shirt goes in alongside David Jenkins this week. No Alan Wyn Jones starting, no Alan Wyn Jones on the bench, but a bit of a more youthful side, lower cap people you want to be seeing coming in. David Jenkins, one of the lads a lot of us are wanting to see get into this Wales side a bit more. So nice to see him starting this week. On to the back row then, where there's been some big shifts up. In terms of the blindside flanker then, Christ Shinuza comes in that number 6 shirt. Open side, Tommy Raffel making a comeback into this Wales team. Had such a good year last year. I wish we could have seen a bit more from him. And Jack Morgan moves to the number 8 shirt as opposed to that blindside flanker. Now, Jack Morgan, of course, still on low caps, and like I've already sort of said, keeping up to date with my club level knowledge is not necessarily the best, but Jack Morgan moving to 8. I've never seen him play 8. He's been playing extremely well in that flanker position for the last sort of 12 months, so, if he can play number 8 as well as he plays flanker, hey, why not give him a go? In the halfback partnership, Thomas Williams comes in alongside Dan Biggar. Rhys Webb did come on last week and seemed to make no impact from the bench. It's not really when you want to be seeing a couple of teams now. There seems to be a bit of a divide in the Six Nations teams now, of teams that have people that come on from the bench and directly impact the game and enhance the team. Wales is unfortunately falling to me as one of those teams that the bench is coming on and nothing really changes and sometimes gets a little bit worse. So I really hope that depth builds up. This would still be my starting halfback partnership, I think, having seen the game last week. In terms of the centres then, Joe Hawkins remains in alongside George North. Now, it did look to me like George North that picked up a bit of a knock in last week's game. He had a couple of big hits and people swinging around with their legs, clipping his legs out from under him. He held his knee a couple of times. So nice to see Jordan North is still in the side. Joe Horgan's made a nice appearance last week, to be fair. Still a young lad. Unfortunately for him, did have that one try sort of slip past him. Very hard for him, 2 forwards against him on his debut. Powerful forwards at that. I don't really hold that one against Twitch, but I thought he had a nice game. And then in terms of those back three, Rio Dyer, who made some good points in the Fantasy League, had some good meters to his name, trying to make the most of it. A couple of passes getting out to him wide, not going quite to hand, not quite giving him that room to work with. I think if they just sort of settle it down a bit, get that ball to him with a bit more space, we could be seeing Rio Dyer actually make quite a nice impact into this game. Josh Adams on the right wing, and finally Liam Williams in that fullback shirt. Of course, got his yellow card last week. I've spoke a bit about that in the review video. I didn't really think that was necessarily a yellow card situation, but up until that, I thought Liam Williams was having an extremely good game in terms of that Wales backfield, put under big pressure, but managing to cope with the situation quite well for big majority of the game. So a shift up in the Wales team. Bit more experimental, a lot more youth, and probably on the whole, when you added up all the caps, there'll be a lot less caps. Is this the right move? I think this is an interesting experiment to see. Scotland's a good team to do this against as well. If you know Scotland are going to be playing like they did against England in Twickenham, they're going to be such an aggressive team. Throwing these boys on, you might be able to meet energy with energy, and you might find this game really opens up into all-out attack. In terms of the replacements then, Scott Baldwin comes in alongside Rhys Carré and Leon Brown making his appearance back. A lot of people want to see Leon Brown really sort of getting into this team a bit more now, so nice to see him in that number 18 shirt. Replacement forwards coming in alongside them then, Rhys Davis and Talupe Faletau. They have gone for that 5-3 split. They thought with how much they'd shifted up some of those forwards, they might go for 6-2 and put the old guard on later. They haven't gone down that route. And then in the replacement backs, Rhys Webb, Rhys Patchell and Alex Cuthbert. Rhys Patchell's an interesting call here. Of course, Dan Biggar's still your main choice. Rhys Patchell makes a nice appearance. He plays so well at club level. He's never quite landed the international scene. He comes on, he plays sort of tier 2 sides extremely well. Tier 1 side, though, we don't really get to see a lot of Rhys Patchell, so I'm looking forward to see how he gets on this game. Can he make that impact we want to see from the bench that we have seen in the past from other Wales fly halves? People like Gareth Anscombe come on and actually feel like they make an impact, so I'm looking forward to see how Patchell gets on. But overall, this is a good Wales team. There's a lot of talent here. I'm liking what they've done with the back row in terms of shifting it up. I just really hope they cope with the pressure of what Scotland are probably going to bring. So in terms of a score prediction, what do we think for this one? Well, I think I'm actually going to be going for Scotland in this one. Seeing the performance they put in against England, the way they were playing to just be so aggressive when they had their hands on the ball, I feel like that's one of the elements that eventually Wales begin to crumble under, is consistent pressure through big players doing one-off runs. And we saw how much the Scotland team was able to sort of narrow defensive, spread the ball out wide, out to people like Duhan van der Merwe. As soon as you give them a bit of room, open up. One of the areas I've been a bit critical of recently for Wales has been the scramble defence. It feels like as soon as someone breaks that line, all hell breaks loose and it begins to go a bit wrong for them. So I feel like Scotland have the opportunity in this one to put the hammer down and potentially have a Six Nations go off with a 2-for-2 here. So I'm going to say Scotland to win. And I'm going to say Scotland to win by 6. That's going to be my prediction, guys. Make sure you do drop down in the comment section your predictions on the game. Make sure you are doing your fantasy leagues. Of course, we're doing these videos slightly out of order, but the teams will be announced over the weekend as well as the review video. So make sure you are subscribed to keep up to date with all the latest videos as they come out. I'll see you all next time, guys. Bye-bye.